So about 10 years ago, you and I flew to Österreich to sample an equation that shouldn't have worked, at least on paper. And that was a mid-size Mercedes sport utility vehicle that was the coupe flavor, fitted with a full-fat AMG propulsion system. Shockingly, it worked incredibly well. The question we have in front of us today, can we take the same size and package, but rip out the 4-liter twin turbocharged V8 and in its stead slide in an EV propulsion system and yet get the same result? So that is certainly an interesting challenge you and I face today, which brings us to the obvious question: what are we doing this challenge with? Well, this is the AMG EQE SUV, also known in Europe as the AMG EQE 53 SUV. And if you have followed our episodes on all of these EQs, this is the mid-size sport utility crossover that is fully electric from Mercedes, which means it has a 90.6 kilowatt hour battery. There are two charging options. There's AC up to 9.6 kilowatts and DC up to 170 kilowatts. Now, AMG or not, this does follow the design theme of all the other EQs you and I have driven, which is to say two things. Number one, form follows function, and number two, love it or hate it. You see, this looks the way it does because they're trying to get the air around the vehicle as efficiently as possible. Now, they have made some changes here. Notice the grille, which really isn't a grille. It's very much in the AMG theme of things. Then we get to the performance figures. This 0 to 60, very respectable, 3.4 seconds. VMAX, 149 miles an hour. Now that brings us to an incredibly prudent question: what's the range? Well, we have to discuss a couple of parameters first to understand the range here. Number one, it's only on offer as all-wheel drive. Number two, the motor and inverter changes because this is an AMG. And number three, it comes fitted with those 21 or 22, so it's not going to be as good as the EQE 350 we drove in Portugal. That one was almost 300 miles of range. This one is rated by the US government as 230 miles of range. So you and I expect EVs to be heavy, but I don't believe we've ever seen anything like this. 5,930 pounds, or depending on express your weights and measures, 2,689 kilograms. Now, as a reminder, this is supposed to be the mid-size AMG SUV that's EV, but that is more than the weight of the basic EQS, meaning the big one SUV. With that, oh, you can hear the sound there. Wow. Actually, let's take some speed off here because this is still a tall SUV. It doesn't rip your face off. That's not the kind of speed it's got. I would argue in terms of delivery of power, this is really not an AMG. So yes, one could consider this a sport utility vehicle or a crossover. Either way, we've already demonstrated the practicality when we flew to Portugal to drive the EQE 350, and we did so by demonstrating some of the cargo capacity as well as packaging people in the second row, which for the avoidance of doubt is the only row behind the front seats. That said, we have to discuss the ass end of this vehicle. Not so much from design, which is exactly like the EQE 350, rather underneath it. You see, this has a four-wheel steering system, but unlike other four-wheel steering systems we've seen in other crossovers or large vehicles or even sports cars, this isn't limited to like 2 or 3 degrees of rear-wheel steering. This is 9 degrees of rear-wheel steering, which translates to much easier maneuverability in low-speed situations, and it does the same thing that the other systems do at high speed, so high-speed stability. But then we can't stop there. You see, the suspension system here has to do a lot of work considering the weight we talked about. So this borrows a page from a Porsche, which is the active roll stabilization. We've seen it in other AMGs, big AMGs at that, and it works to great effect, say, in a GLS. Here, it's a split sway bar, and there's an electric motor, it's 48-volt system, that's separate from the EV of the car, and that literally can keep the car from leaning from side to side. Or that is what the theory is. Let's understand what that means as we go down this a stunning backcountry road somewhere in South Orange County. Here, the first thing you notice is Yes, the active roll stabilization, it does play a bit of a role here, but it does not mitigate the height of the vehicle and that weight. At the end of the day, it feels like this thing does want to lean over. It's not grotesque. It doesn't feel out of control, but it's not quite to like the hair on fire driving dynamics of a regular AMG, even a GLE, meaning comparing it directly apples to apples of a tall crossover ICE to a tall crossover EV. So no, it's not that time to play your favorite game of mine, the options game, because I don't have any pricing. You see, the opportunity to drive this was good news very early. Bad news, it's one of those international driving programs where all markets haven't finished the pricing, but what we can do is kind of guess. Remember the EQE 350 that we drove? That had a base price of $77,900 in the US, whether it's rear-wheel drive or all-wheel drive, kind of a bargain for the US market. But the EQE 500, that was $89,500 in base price. So you know this is going to be probably 100 grand, maybe even more. This one you're looking at has a couple options fitted to it. It's got the night package. It does have the carbon ceramic rotors fitted to it. But when I say rotors, yes, plural, but not 4 of them, just in the front. This one also is fitted with a stunning green color. I'd like to point out, this was the only one that wasn't the German rainbow on this program. Although that color on the inside, that is terrible. This needs kind of like a light tan, maybe a light gray or something that would really pop to get this color to show how beautiful it is in the sunshine. Oh, one other huge point. One of the reasons they haven't finalized pricing for the US market, the US has not decided whether they're gonna make the hyperscreen, which this car is fitted with, as standard or not. So let's say for the sake of discussion, you and I were to go into slippery mode. Now we're in slippery mode. This is 50% of the total output, so you definitely notice the difference. It's still not a slouch. Okay, so let's put that aside and go into sport. It's in sport and sport plus where we get 100% of that promised ridiculous amount of output. Now, when we get into sport plus and we get into the race start, that's where it gives us 110%, and that's the overboost function. And notice when we do that, it changes the sound profile inside the car. Yes, that is manufactured sound. So not one of our Living With episodes, but I do want to share a little bit behind the scenes with you here. I started out in North San Diego this morning, then took the car to our friend Brian Max's secret road in South Orange County. If you couldn't tell, I proceeded to burn out all the range. Now the challenge with that, I have to get this back to Santa Monica this evening, and from that point, 95 miles. However, I had 91 miles of range left. So I stopped just on the other side of Corona Airport, and I found a charge point charger where I have replenished 65 kilowatts. Now, that doesn't sound like a hell of a lot, but $45, even for Southern California, that's a hell of a lot of money. That's equivalent to basically putting gas in a car this size. And then there's the reality of I'm going to trade this car in tonight for something far more interesting. Remember we talked about the 9 degrees of rear wheel steering? Don't try this at home. This is the benefit. Look at this. This has the wheelbase of a Porsche Panamera. So what is it, about 119 inches? Actually, it's an inch longer than a Panamera. And I can go in circles on a 2-lane road here. Okay, so what have you and I learned today? Well, if you've been paying attention, I would argue this is good, definitely improves on some of the foibles we experienced with the EQE 350, but an AMG it is not. And this is where I think the Europeans got it right. They don't call this the AMG EQE over in Europe. Instead, they call it the AMG EQE 53, which translated into the US Mercedes parlance, that is like the middle of the road AMG, which is exactly what this is, which brings us to the wish list. And there, I would argue, take some of the learning from this and apply it to the basic and middle level of the EQ series, not just the EQE SUV, and improve the composure. That's what I was really looking for in the EQE 350, which we have gotten here in every parameter: steering, driving dynamics, obviously acceleration, and then maybe save the full-fat AMG moniker for when we have technology where we can make this 4,000 pounds, not 6,000 pounds. Yes, I know a lot to ask, but I'm one man, and this is the point of the episode that I turn around to you guys to opine in the comments below, or via our social media, MotoManTV on word, MotoManTV on word, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. And with that, if you got value out of this episode, I would greatly appreciate you sharing them with all your friends on your socials and doing all the YouTube things. Subscribe, notifications, and click the like button. Until I see you in the next episode, bis später.